Innocent, and I want to set the stage and draw the picture for you so you can understand why we're calling the mothers of these incarcerated sons innocent, so that you can get a little more insight on how the conversation is going to carry. So Dion, please share with us that day before or the day of, wherever you on the storyline choose to begin.
So why do I say that my son is innocent? The reason for this is because on the night that my son was arrested, he had gone to share the news with his boys that he had gotten a job. And it was raining. His boys weren't home. He crossed the street to go over to the other buildings, the other houses, to find someone who could give him a ride back home because it was too far for him to walk. And in crossing the street, he saw a friend. He's grown up in this neighborhood his entire life. And he said, "Hey, you trying to get home?" He said, "Yeah, man, give me a ride." My son got in the back of the truck. So this is a pickup truck. So it has a bucket seat in the back. They put that seat down for my son to get in. It was a driver and two other people in the car. They hadn't gone even 50 feet, not even that far. The cops come behind them, lights flashing. He said, "What's going on?" The two people in the front hopped out and ran. The driver stops. My son is in the back. He said, what's going on? What are you guys doing?" The cop comes up. Out of the car is a pizza guy. And the cop says to the pizza guy, "These are the two guys who robbed you." Went to court. My son got sentenced to 20 years.
Wow.
My son will be 29 on Wednesday, another birthday where he's locked up for something that he didn't do. There was no DNA. There was no pick from a lineup. There were no fingerprints.
And what state?
This is Maryland. Two black males robbed him. The pizza guy said he couldn't identify them. He couldn't see them because
It's
all he could
nighttime,
see were
right?
their eyes because they had on masks and gloves.
Wow.
But he knows it was my son. The reason that it's innocent is also because the person who was in the front was one of the individuals who was involved. Called the lawyer and said he didn't do it. Said, "Can you come to court and testify?" And she said, "No, because I'm scared of MS-13. And you can't protect me." MS-13 is a Hispanic gang.
It's an
Said, "You
Hispanic
can't
gang.
protect me." She said, "Can't you just use this?" And the lawyer said, "No, hearsay is not allowed in court." So now we take it to the jury. 3 days, deliberation. 3 days. This is not murder, this is robbery. And the jury came back with not guilty of possession of a weapon in commission of a felony, but guilty of armed robbery.
Wow.
Wow.
For that, my son is serving 20 years.
And there's nothing that can be done in terms of the legal position that you guys could get to defend him.
Well,
Change that.
this is the thing. You can. This is what it takes money to do that. So I'm in the process now of working with a lawyer in a post-conviction because in order to appeal this.
But in the meantime, he had to do 10 years. So even so, the innocence of your time has been taken and robbed from you. So
Time you can never get back.
yes.
Time that can
So
never
his whole
get
adult
back.
life has really
Pretty
been
much
spent
all
on
his
the
20s.
inside.
He has grown up in prison. He
Mm.
has.
And you've mothered him the whole time.
Every
and
step.
he's on the inside. So the idea around an incarcerated son, mothers and sons have a unique position in terms of the relationships they have. I watched also, my brother was incarcerated when I was, I guess 16 or 17. So having to see what that journey can be like from the mother's standpoint. I watched my mother taking Valium because she had to deal with every court date in that way to kind of numb herself. And the innocence of your child you gave birth to is something that profoundly, even from a father's standpoint, because I can see the difference in that, how that channel works. I'm gonna I see your eyes, I see the emotion in your eyes, a birthday coming like you just mentioned, and something you just also shared with us around not being able to send him even something as simple as a birthday card.
You can't. A lot of prisons have moved to greeting cards being contraband because it was a vehicle for people to send in money, drugs, razor blades, so they've just put a ban on greeting cards. So can't send him a birthday card, can't even send a card to say, I'm thinking about you, or cards of encouragement. So a lot of it is just letters and postcards. And so that's what we'll do to celebrate his birthday on Wednesday.
And this is again why I wanted to do this, is to actually make the point of one of the things we had a conversation earlier today before we came on air was the fact that oftentimes, and you said it well, you mentioned that how is it if we know that the justice system is flawed, how is it that we emotionally and visually convict people because we see them locked up or we see them wearing a handcuff? And a lot of times people don't know the backstory or the human part of this individual that's going on. It's just assumed, throw the key away and just discard who this person is and all the other parts to their family that they are now detached from, to the children that they may have had if they have children. And then that brings me to Patricia. Your son has a child or children?
He has two children,
He has
a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old.
And your grandmother, how long has he been locked up?
He has been locked up for 2.5 years now, waiting for trial.
So tell me, where does your story place the innocence in what we're talking about today? How do you share that story?
My recollection is that when he actually started a new life, if you will, by going down to North Carolina, new job, new environment, away from the old neighborhood, and being in the street a lot. He was bathing in the tub and getting ready for the next day to go for an interview for a new job, gotten his license, what have you, and detectives came down from a local Bronx precinct, investigated him, didn't read him his rights or what have you, and told him that he was, someone that they had come to know as a person who committed a crime, a murder.
Somebody they just assumed that he might have done, but what evidence did they have?
They have someone who picked him out of a lineup that saw him from 2 landings away, and his co-defendant who implicated him and who has since recanted his story several times. And my son actually was with a girlfriend at the time, and she will not come forward because she has been involved with the law herself and didn't want to risk what would happen to her. So all of those reasons, they were able to gather enough information and to indict him, and we are waiting for him to be able to prove his innocence. And so far he's been waiting 2.5 years. And so every month for 2.5 years I take a day off of work and I go and I sit in that hell of a courtroom.
And deal with the emotional part of that's toying with you. And there's a lot of other layers to this. As a mother, you can't pull your energy out of control, but so much because it's going to affect him, because he's sitting there and he has to go back inside when that court date is done. So no matter what you feel like, you don't get to be you on the spot, because you have to also monitor what that's going to do to him for those days going forward. So, as a mother, as a family member, what's the family temperature like in terms of how your family has treated your sons or yourselves even through this time? What kind of support are you getting?
Great support from the family. Our family is actually very extensive because I was a teenage mom, and so my son started out the beginning of his life growing up with another family, and now he's not their adoptive child. We're all family. So very extensive sisters and brothers and nieces, nephews, goddaughters and what have you, and we're all rallying together to support him, to pray for him, to meditate and lift him up in prayer so we can get through this ordeal.
Do you find that actually makes a difference? Deanna and I was having a conversation this morning about the amount of support that those male incarcerated sons have to go through from the inside. And when you think in terms of the support, you actually have to also measure that there is a certain amount of the outside. He's living vicariously through you and the family members. So, Dion, I see you smiling. What is your thought?
Well, so my experience is different. My family, they don't even talk about my son at all. It is probably the greatest banner of, oh my God, please don't use the family name when you talk about your son being in prison. So there's that piece of it. My husband, who is my son's stepfather, very supportive, biological father, not in the picture at all. And for his sister, if you did not know my daughter when she was younger, you would have no idea that she has a brother. Why? Because people react so negatively to her when they find out that she has a brother who's incarcerated. And so it's only her friends who have known her since elementary school who know that she has a brother.
That side of her.
And
Okay.
the others do not. So there's that piece of it. I was nodding because with my son, I'll be walking through the city and he's on the phone and I will tell him what I'm seeing. I'll describe
how
to
wonderful.
him, these are the lights, you should see Times Square now, you should see, Broadway, and he'll hear the singing. He says, Mom, what do they have on? What are they doing? He'll hear an alarm go off on a car and he says, what kind of car is it? What color is it? What are they doing? And you hear the guys in the background going, where are you? He said, shut up, fool, I'm in New York. They're like, no, you're not. You're up here in the cell. He's like, no, I'm in New York. They're like, what you doing? What's she saying? And so they're all gathered around the phone and I'm describing the sounds and the feel. And so I will walk, because once I get on the subway, I lose the signal.
Right.
So I walk around telling him what I'm seeing and describing it to him.
But see, hold your thought for a second, because this is back to what we were talking about earlier, how the transition from being inside to outside is looking, and what does that look like? Because so often, and Michelle, you mentioned it too, it's like as if they were at a pause button in time. Whatever was going on when they were last on the outside
Right.
becomes where they pick up from. So by her using technology and Dion
That
using,
I believe is a
that's a
brilliant
fabulous
way.
idea
That
to
is a
keep him
fabulous
connected.
idea, yeah, that I've never ever thought of, to suggest to people what they can do. Almost treat them as if they're blind.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you have to tell a blind person and describe what the color blue is, you do it.
It's
You
amazing.
use your words. That's
It's
amazing. It gives me goosebumps.
And so
It's
I
amazing.
take pictures. I'll take pictures of new construction. I'll go back to the old neighborhoods that he used to know and I say, look at the building they have now and look at this. So he feels as if even though he is not physically there, he's going through it.
Yes.
Because
It's like, oh.
traumatically, the transition of coming home. I remember the day that my brother came home, how overwhelming that feeling was for him. And you have a sense of freedom, but also you're afraid of that you can't catch up to what other people think is just normal. And for you, that normal has a process. And when you think in terms of how, this journey is, like you mentioned before, the family is impacted by it in so many different ways.
Yes.
I asked the question earlier today, if you had to be asked the question that you wanted to begin to tell the story in a way that can make people take off their negative judgment, what question would you want people to ask? So what was that? Share with us.
My question is, for all the conversations that we've heard, for all the talk that there's been about the justice system being skewed and the system not working, why is it then that so many in society assume that everyone who's locked up is guilty? You say that the system is skewed. This skewed system, this system that's biased, this system that doesn't give, regardless of race, in some instances we're seeing more and more cases of now, they don't give people their fair due. But yet, we automatically assume that everybody who is in prison is guilty and that everybody who's in prison is bad. Why is that?
Because it's easier, and sometimes people are overwhelmed or undereducated about how to be human, how to be compassionate, how to be in touch with what if that were you. Not just what if that was a family member, but what if that were you. And to be able to identify with that connectiveness, really is a process. You know, the judgment we're taught to judge is kind of like the days of when they believed that witches were evil and that they wanted to kind of cast a stone. People do that emotionally as well because they don't have the education in terms of information. Patricia and I were talking earlier during the week, and you know, oftentimes we're having these conversations off air, but I want you to share. One of the things I said to Patricia, just to let people know, I said if there were an organization for mothers who had incarcerated sons, would you join? Would you give your voice? What did you say to me the other day?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, I would indeed, and like I said, I do have great support. But interestingly enough, Deanne, the more of the support comes from my child's adoptive family, not so much from the natural family. They hardly ever even ask about him.
Yes.
If I bring him up, they'll say, "Oh, how's he
How
doing?"
is he doing? Exactly.
But they never
Exactly.
initiate a conversation
Yes.
to ask, knowing that that's like an active part of what I'm dealing with, you know, as far as a life
Yes.
challenge.
See, and the life challenge is how do you maintain yourself as a woman, as a mother?
And that
what's
was gonna be
dating
my
like,
question.
What's being in a relationship
Right.
impacting you
Like,
as well?
we're thinking about them inside, but how do you handle yourself? What are you doing for your emotional and mental well-being,
And not
knowing
feeling
that
guilty that you're
that
not happy with
child
sometimes.
you've given birth to, someone is now taking their freedom away from them? How do you deal with that on a mental and emotional level?
I had to really go to a spiritual place for that. I'm not religious, but I'm very spiritual. And so for me, after many, many, many conversations, it finally dawned on me that this experience, this journey is not for the it's not for the weak. I didn't choose it, but there's a reason. So since there are no mistakes and all things ultimately work for the greatest and the highest good, my conclusion is this: I am experiencing this for a reason. And you cannot testify unless you've been tested.
Oh, say that
Woo,
again.
say that again.
Cannot testify unless you've been tested. And
That's
it's
the same thing with you cannot have a friend until you've been tested because you don't know to what extent you'll
Don't
go the
know.
distance for someone, with someone. And on this
Right.
journey, what I want you guys, we're going to take a brief pause, share some commercial break, and we're going to come back on that note in a moment. But think about the process that you want to share with people on the outside around their judgment or you as a woman and the process that you have to go through on a day-to-day.
Yeah,
It got very emotional and Patricia went into tears. One of the things that we also underestimate about time and our loved ones and spending time, you know, this is a question I started asking some of my friends through some text messages a couple of years ago. If time were $1, what would you choose, to make it or spend it? So when you talked about your son and the tears started rolling down your eyes, tell us what were you thinking at that time? That's the question I asked you when we were on the break.
It's like his life is on hold. And we have a great rapport since he was a little child and could speak. You know, so we can talk about anything and everything with each other, and it's just beautiful. You know, I can tell him when I'm not feeling well because of my monthly. He can tell me about, you know, an experience with a girlfriend, and but basically, you know, he's reiterated over and over again, no matter how many books or letters we have exchanged or phone calls that I don't miss, and I get to talk to him live. He feels like, which is true, his life is on hold and everybody else's life is going forward.
See, Dion, when you mentioned about how it is that you take your cell phone and you give him stolen moments of what's going on in the city and moving around, showing him past and present, you know, what Patricia said that was powerful when we were on the break was when that call comes in and you miss it, you don't get that back.
you don't get that time back. And I so this is the thing about the call. You see voicemail and you see that it's a missed call, and I listen to the message and it says you have a collect call from, or you have a call from an inmate at, and you know, it gives a name, and even that to me is like, okay, all right,
A rush of energy.
I've connected, you know, with this. But you do really cherish those moments. And I know sometimes my son will call and he doesn't say anything, and I talk. And I feel that 30 minutes, because the max phone call is 30 minutes, and then you call again and you pay more money. It's a whole other situation.
Yes.
But you realize, and I've said to him, you know, son, how come you're not saying anything? He said, Mom, I just need to hear your voice to get me through the next 30
Ooh, that
days.
connection.
Yes.
It's just the talking and the connection.
Your voice is like that.
That
comfort
vibration.
blanket.
It's
Yeah.
that. It's that. He says, okay, I can make it now.
Yes.
And when I don't hear from him, and there's something that's going on where the prison is in a lockdown, and my first thought is, dear God,
Is he all right?
is he all right? Father, wrap your wings around him and keep him safe.
See, so stop right there. The spirituality, that's what I'm talking about. We were on in the waiting room earlier, and I said there are often people who misunderstand how it is that a person of from the inside becomes so spiritually moved to find God. I had a conversation with a friend of mine who had spent some time in jail, and he said he found God in jail. And sometimes people discount the authenticity of someone's spiritual pathway or awakening because of where it happened. You said something profound earlier about how do you get people to embrace the fact that that is authentic? Someone going to jail, finding their spiritual calling or awakening.
They have to be non-judgmental. They have to step back from it, because here's the thing. We have found that connection to spirit in the deepest, darkest moments of our lives. No one will forget 9/11.
Right.
For real.
No one. And that was deep. That was an emotional trauma.
Yes.
Well, those moments are replicated throughout life. Maybe not on a magnitude that impacts thousands of people, but the fact that it impacts you, it is in that moment that you find that. And it can be something as simple as seeing an inmate getting stabbed on the ground. That could have been you. You could have been going to have a meeting with that person. It's something like seeing maybe a CO having an inmate in a headlock.
Yes.
And it's like, you know what? He responded the way I was going to. So in that, you were able to see a direct connection between,
Yourself
man, I
and
just
outside,
had that
yes.
conversation. Or I don't even believe in God, because if God really had me, I wouldn't be in here. And then God shows you, let me show you what it would look like if I wasn't here for you. So we have to recognize that they have more, let's call them 9/11 moments
Yes.
in prison
Yes.
than we may have out here.
But think
And so
about it,
that's
yes.
where they make that connection to go, really and truly,
Yes.
you see me, I'm not
Yes.
invisible to you.
Right.
And the fact that they wake up, they could get killed at night while they're sleeping. You have more attacks that happen at night. So every day when they wake up, more so than when we do.
They
we don't-
appreciate each day.
They appreciate every moment.
Every moment.
Every single
Because
moment.
trauma has a way of making an atheist call on the Lord.
Yes, indeed.
I'm telling you.
Yes.
Trauma
And so
has a way of doing that.
Is what they have. Those are the moments that they have. There can be a beef just because they happen to get a visit and the other person didn't. They have money on their commissary. They can make
Oh,
phone
the
calls. They're like,
jealousy
oh,
is
you
probably
got it like that.
profound.
They were able to buy a pair of shoes from the catalog. Oh, you got it like that. So they can get jumped at any moment. It's a very contained environment. Their chances of getting jumped and attacked are much greater than ours walking on the street. So yes, they have many more amplified reasons and reminders to give thanks. And
to be
that's
Wow.
how they make that connection.
But you see, in terms of letting people on the outside become more sensitive to the fact that we have today begun to put a face on people who are incarcerated instead of putting a number on them and putting a conviction on them, there is so much more going on. When you think in terms of going to visit a loved one on the inside and you see some of even the other inmates in there and some of the turmoil they're in, there's something really powerful going on. I dare to say that in the back of my mind, I keep thinking about even the journey traveling to the jails. When you look at the loved ones who are going to visit these people every week, no matter rain, sleet, snow, no matter if they get changed from one jail to one further away from home. I remembered going anywhere from 45 minutes to Rikers Island from where I lived to a 6-hour bus ride, and we had to walk down a dirt road that had no sidewalks for about 3 or 4 miles in the snow. And like you said before, what happens when you think in terms of your health issue and you're not able to physically go on that visit to see him, and you start thinking to yourself, but that's the only day he has.
Yes.
He doesn't have
Only moments he has.
another day or do-over for another week to come. So no matter what, you have to get there. So when you think in terms of your day off, you even mentioned it, Patricia, that on that once a month chance you get to take that time off. What's the response from even work about why every month you have to take that time, or do they understand?
I've only met two people who need to know, which is my manager and her assistants, and they're very supportive. They're very
Now,
supportive.
do you
There are
get
no
to
questions.
see him
I get to
on
see-
those days, even if it is just the back of his head?
Sometimes I
You
do,
know?
sometimes I don't. There was one time I went to court and they already knew that because the DA was not available, they knew that the date was going to be rescheduled to the following month. But because my son's attorney said, well, you know, his family's here and they'd like to see him, the judge, we waited, we were the last ones in the courtroom. This was from the morning time, mid-morning, 10:30. They're like, okay, you don't want to have the date, and you don't want us to give it the date now, so now you have to wait. And we were there till 3 minutes of 5. We were the last ones in the courtroom, the last ones on that floor.
Wow.
But you know what? It was
But at
worth
the
it.
same time, it was worth
it was worth
those
it.
moments.
Absolutely.
Listen,
Absolutely.
Never underestimate the power of a look, because this is the other thing. When you go for a visit, you can only touch at the beginning and
And at the end.
There's no touching in between, because you could lose your visits forever. They can confiscate. They can say, you know, you violated this rule. You can't come back. So just the physical touch
Wow.
is key too, in terms of keeping
Your
that whole
connectiveness.
connection. Oh yes.
And see, this is the thing that I'm saying about putting a face, putting the story on. There are other layers and elements that go on when you think in terms of how you're looking at your loved ones, how you're touching them spiritually and emotionally, as well as financially. Just briefly, what are some of the expenses that people don't know about having an incarcerated son on you, whether it be from the dating aspect to just you as a single woman?
Well, I have agreed with the family, and I've agreed that I will make sure he has money to make phone calls and buy his supplies and what have you from commissary, what have you. They're taking care of the legal fees. I'm not able to. I'm single on my own, so I do that, and very practical things. Sometimes I'll just I'll buy a box of envelopes, of course take it out of the box, envelopes, stamps, writing paper,
So what does it cost you every month or annually to cook?
anywhere from $50 to $100, $150 every single month.
And this is without fail. It's, if you think in terms of when you have children, they're at a young age, you know at some point this is going to change because they're able to sustain themselves. But that pause button is also on you because you're still the same financial part of the parenting because they're not able to sustain and take care of themselves. So you have that impact as a newlywed. How did being married impact you and having your son by a different father with this?
Well, it's been great because my husband is totally supportive in just every way. His nickname is LSH, which is Loving Supportive Husband. That's what it stands for.
Oh, I love
So
it.
he signs it, you know, love LSH, Loving Supportive Husband. So everything from going to court, finding the lawyer to do the post-conviction, yeah, it's $15,000 and we're paying it, but it's making sure that the phone account is set up, making sure that there's money on the account, understanding that system. It's
And there's a fee,
And there's
actually,
a
and
fee.
every time, you know, sometimes he'll call, or even if he
Listen.
miss me, Ma, I know that, you know, you're financially challenged, even if you could send me $10. Well, I can't just send him $10 because the fee is almost $7.
Oh,
just-
so I just want to make
And
sure
I-
that people listening understand if they have never heard. There's a fee
So there's
to send
these
the
are two
money.
different systems. Yeah, there are two different systems. So explain those.
I'm
Patricia.
using, and this is something my son told me about. There's jpay.com.
Okay.
And that's an entity that
It's almost
does-
like a PayPal entity just for
It's like an
yes.
online payment
On-
system
yes.
that you
Right.
can use to add
Okay.
money to commissary.
Right,
Okay.
right.
So that system doesn't exist in all prison systems and in all jail systems. So
Oh.
Maryland, for example, doesn't have it for their state prisons, but they have it for the detention centers. So in order for me to send my son money for his commissary, it's a money order.
Okay.
that I have to purchase the money order, mail the money order to him. He doesn't get the money order. They deposit that money order into his account, and then they send him a statement that says, this is how much you have on your account. So I make a copy of the money order so he can
make
keep
sure,
track of
right.
how much money's on his account. When it comes to phone calls, it's through T-Netics, or they have a new system now. So it used to be that it was $2.85 to connect the call,
Oh, wow.
and then 50 cents per minute after that. So a half an hour phone call was costing $11.85.
So that's like jumping in a New York City cab.
Hello.
Yes.
So
It's
if
a
you want
long
to talk for
distance.
longer than 30 minutes, he's like, "Ma, I'll call you back." Okay, that's another $11.85.
Because now when he calls back, even though it's the same number,
$2.85
to connect. I tell you.
So who actually gets all of these pieces of money? Is it going somewhat to the prison, or is there some other?
These are private entities. So they have that
So they
phone
outsource.
system, and you set it up with them, and then you have to add a minimum of $25 on the account.
So
in order for him to be able to
annual
make
sense,
the
what are
call.
you spending annually?
Oh, for me,
to take care of?
annually, mine is more monthly, and monthly for me is $500 a month.
Just
for
the basics.
Yeah, just
not-
because I can't send him envelopes, I can't send him a pen, a stamp, it's all contraband. And you get too many contrabands, and guess what? They'll say no more mail from your mom,
I made a
because she keeps
mistake
sending
I
contraband
made a
stuff.
mistake last month, and I sent him, I just grabbed a notebook. And I wasn't even thinking about it. It was a small spiral bound notebook, and I just figured, well, the pages were perforated, so he could just pull them out,
But it
write
had
whatever.
wire on it.
And he said, Ma, I almost didn't get it. The guy pulled it out because I put a card in there, I put a letter, I put the stamps, I put envelopes, and when the I guess security guard or correction officer got it, they took the whole thing apart, ripped it all open, and he almost didn't get it. And he said, well, could you at least give me the paper?
But see, this is
Wow.
not being educated
But
about
see,
the system.
you'd have to understand, because the spiral that makes the spiral bound
Couldn't be
used as a
weapons.
weapon.
Yes.
Same thing with, they can use the magazines as like shanks. So it's understanding, okay, so I understand why you can't have it, but did the family know that?
Right.
So they
Right.
don't know that. So in Maryland, you can't send them anything. They have to buy everything.
From the prison
From the
itself,
prison
prison
system,
store.
from the commissary, from the
Okay.
store. So soap, toothpaste, toilet paper, all of that. So I've had instances where my son has said, "Mom, listen, can you just help somebody out?" I'm like, "Okay, you know what my thing is for that? Are we helping in, is it not gonna be that we're like,
Exactly.
muling or
Taking
whatever
care
the-
of them for
And
the
he's
rest
like,
of the
no.
time
He said,
and
"No, Mom,
muling.
this person found out this person was using detergent to take a bath."
Wow.
Wow.
Because their family, the mother was on a fixed income. So one of the things that you never say when you're in the visiting room is, "And what are you in for?" There's just certain codes of being when you go in. So if the family or the person wants to share, then they do. So my son had called me and said, "Mom, so-and-so is here, can you call his mom for him?" And I did. Long story short, I would take this lady with me every week to see her son. And the first time I took her, they cried. The son came for the visit, the mother cried. She hasn't seen her son in 11 years. Her son was serving 35 years. She said, "You're a stranger, you don't even know me." And family members would tell her, "I'll come get you and take you." And she said, "I'd get dressed, I'd sit, I'd wait," and they wouldn't show up.
You know what? It brings me to my 13-year-old. She's just got on Facebook, so that's a big whoop-de-doo for her. And she turned to her friends, and they were having a conversation, and she said, "Oh yeah, because the struggle was real." And that just flashed into my mind when you were talking. Your children and other children like them, they are really going through a struggle. Their struggle is real. They
Well,
get it.
Before we lose time, and I want to get some of the last thoughts and comments and some of the things that you may have coming up. Share with us briefly, because we are running out of time. This is one of those kinds of conversations that does not end, but I wanted to at least get some of the important things met. So do you have some things coming up, or is there some last thoughts you want our listeners? Patricia, we'll start with you.
I'm just excited about Unveiled Unlocked's 3rd anniversary coming up in August during Harlem Week. I hope
Awesome.
everybody is out there to support us and join us and celebrate us and themselves.
Awesome.
I want everyone to understand that it is a struggle, it does continue, and when you think of the number of people incarcerated, 1 out of 3, by the time we're done, will have been incarcerated. So this will impact your life whether or not you're aware of it.
Yes.
So it's time to be aware, to step out there, and to get involved, because you can make a difference.
Yes. Michelle, any last thoughts?
I kind of devised from what the two mothers and our experts here were talking about that 3 of the major coping tips: be good to yourself and take care of yourself on the outside so you can help take care of the person on the inside. Learn everything you can about the prison system where your loved one is,
Yes.
because the more you're educated, apparently the more you can help them.
Yes.
Okay? And then have at least one person that you can be totally honest with to dump all your crap
Yes.
out on.
Yes.
So how close was I with the coping
Good.
tips?
Accurate.
That's
Accurate.
wonderful.
On
That's
point.
wonderful. So, Unveiled, Unlocked Their Elements. This segment was Locked Up But Innocent. I want you guys to follow us on our social media so you can see some of the other things that Michelle is going to be posting on our Tumblr page. I want you to also know, ironically, the divine order is how this timing is of what I'm getting ready to do, a mural project with some young adults who are coming out of the system, and they're through a probationary department. So we're doing art with them so that they can give them to a nonprofit in the community that they live in, so they get to see their mark on a beautiful way building up. So I use art as my vehicle to uplift and to also repurpose. So Unveiled, Unlocked next week is going to be doing our show on Glam It Up. It's not what you think, although these are designers who make beautiful clothing. They are actually going to go deeper, like we did today, about what the impact emotionally is on beautifying yourselves. I am Alethea, I'm your host. We are Unveiled, Unlocked, Bare Elements. Please stay with us.